appreciate your service, all right? Yeah. Hey guys, hey, welcome into Buffalo Trace, guys. My name's Owen. I'll be your tour guide today, all right? Originally from Northern Kentucky, joined the Coast Guard out of high school for about 6 years. It was really fun. Was down in Florida for most of it. Got a little too hot for me down there. Missed my bourbon roots, missed my family, whatnot. So decided to come on home back to Kentucky. Currently at the University of Kentucky studying chemical engineering. Okay. Goal is to become a master distiller one day. I really like bourbon. I really like having fun and talking to people, guys. That's the goal of today. We're gonna have some fun, have some good conversations surrounding bourbon, right? And maybe learn a thing or two along the way. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. Hey. Well, welcome into Buffalo Trace. We are the oldest continuously operating distillery in the United States. Third oldest in the world. We're very proud of our history here. It dates all the way back to 1786. All right, that's when the first distillation took place on property. Now, personally, guys, I think it happened before then. They were just too drunk to write it down. Right? But we'll jump back a little bit further. To 1775, two brothers by the name of Willis and Hancock Lee. They depart Virginia. They're land surveyors by trade. They're looking for a place to settle. Okay, they came across these tracks, these traces, if you will, made by a certain animal. Can anybody guess what animal that might be? The buffalo?
Had to be.
The antelope? A beaver. There we go, guys. Well, you're all wrong, guys. It was the bison. All right.
Yeah.
Buffalo are native to Africa and Asia. Bison are native to North America, so it was the bison that they were tracking. All right. In our backyard, right here, there's the Kentucky River. All right. The Kentucky River has a 90-degree turn in it, right in our backyard. Makes a natural sand bed, allowing those bison to cross over the river. All right. Making a really big trace, guys. On Willis and Hancock Lee's plot of the area, on their chart of the area, they wrote the Great Buffalo Trace right on that 90-degree turn in our backyard, guys. In 1999, when the Sazerac Company was looking to rebrand us, they found that chart. They decided to pay homage to the bison, or the buffalo, if you will. They used to hang out in our backyard. If you guys want to call us Bison Trace, you have my permission. Just nobody's going to know what you're talking about, all right? Sound good? We're talking about the Kentucky River. The Kentucky River is actually a great place to set up a distillery because the Kentucky River actually flows north. Flows north to the Ohio River, which flows west to the Mississippi. The Mississippi then flows south all the way down to a major port called New Orleans, Louisiana. Has anybody been to New Orleans before? Yeah. Guys, what do they do in New Orleans? Yeah, they party and they drink, guys. They were doing it back then too. So these distilleries, right? They put their excess grain through these stills, right? They then throw those that white dog that comes out the other end. They throw that into a barrel. They put it onto these flatboats. They would sail those flatboats up the Kentucky to the Ohio to the Mississippi, all the way down to New Orleans, Louisiana, where they would then sell their product. Okay, by the time those barrels had gotten down there, they'd absorbed some color, absorbed some flavor from that oak that it was interacting with along the way, right? Changing its flavor profile, changing its mouthfeel, guys. They decided this was better. All right, so they kept aging it in bourbon barrels, right? Started aging them in barrels. This is where the term bourbon comes from, guys, because all those barrels were coming out of Bourbon County, Kentucky. Right, they were all stamped with Bourbon County out. They weren't sure what to call it when it got down there because it had changed color, right? So they started calling it bourbon, guys. Now, they couldn't sail those flatboats back up the river, right? So instead of sailing them back up the river, they had to sell off that bourbon, right? They made all that money. They started drinking and partying. They would then sell off their boats, right? They would buy horses. They would drink, race, and gamble, right? All the way back up to Kentucky, where once they got up here, they would let those horses go free. That's how horses became native to the area. I had to say Kentucky does two things really well. First and foremost, I say we do bourbon pretty dang well, right? But secondly, I'd say horses, okay? We sure do love our horse racing here in Kentucky. If you haven't gotten the chance, go around and check those bluegrass farms that they're living on nowadays. They got a pretty good life up here, all right? So, jumping ahead to 1869, where we meet a man by the name of Colonel E.H. Taylor. Anybody know him?
No.
I thought you might have met him. Dang. Yeah, I spent a few late nights at my house with old Colonel E.H. Taylor, guys. If you don't know any of these names from here on out, just assume they have a bottle named after him, okay? So Colonel E.H. Taylor, he hits the scene. He's a banker by trade. All right, he specializes in what I like to call OPM. Anybody know what that might be? Other people's money, okay? He loves to spend other people's money, all right? As a banker, he actually spent some time overseas in Europe. He learned the tricks and the trade of the whiskey industry, all right? He saw some investments coming into his bank here in Kentucky for some distilleries in the area. He said, now must be the time to strike. So he takes $6,000. He buys the distillery on property here, was known as the Leestown Distillery, named after Willis and Hancock Lee. He buys the distillery, right? He actually tears down the distillery that they built, and he invests $80,000 into the property here, okay? He learned overseas that copper actually removes sulfides, right? Copper's very important in making a quality distillate, so he's going to put copper in all of his tools, right? In his still and his fermentation tanks along the way. Everything that distillate touches along the way is going to be copper because it removes sulfides. Now, anybody here drink wine?
Yeah.
Everybody drink wine at home? Yeah, if you drink wine at home, sometimes you drink too much wine, you get a little sulfite headache, right? Because those sulfites are still in that product. Now, you're not going to get a sulfite headache from drinking bourbon. Now, don't get me wrong. You're a little dehydrated, you drink a little bit too much bourbon, you might get a headache, guys. I just haven't found out what too much is yet. So if you have, you'll have to let me know, okay? On my first tour of the day, a guy came up to me after I said that. He's like, actually, I haven't found out what too much is because by the time I get there, I'm too drunk to stop. So, but yeah, you're not going to get a headache from drinking bourbon because there's no sulfites in it, okay? He's so proud of this copper that he builds up in his distillery. He actually renames the distillery to OFC, right? This stands for Old Fire Copper. Now, this is important, guys, because in about 10 minutes, there's going to be a quiz. All right, if you guys get the answer to the quiz question right, the tasting at the end of the tour will be complimentary. All right? Very important. So you guys need to know Old Fire Copper. You got that?
Old Fire Copper.
She actually volunteered to pay just in case you guys don't get the quiz question right. So Old Fire Copper, you got to remember that. Otherwise, you got to pay up, right? Old Fire Copper. Everything's going well for Old Fire Copper for about 10 years. Then lightning strikes and it burns the distillery to the ground. Bummer. Bummer. We already talked about Taylor, though. He specializes in OPM, so what's he going to do?
Get some more.
Get some more other people's money to spend, right? He finds a man by the name of George T. Stagg. Spent some late nights with him? Absolutely, right? George T. Stagg, he comes on board. He actually buys Taylor out of 499 of his 500 shares of the property, okay? He keeps one share of the property for Taylor. It's now known as the Master Distiller share. Taylor, a very well-known name in the bourbon industry, kind of the father of bourbon. If you were to look at a Mount Rushmore bourbon, Colonel E.H. Taylor, he'd be front and center on it, okay? Modernized, industrialized, followed in Bondak. Guys, he did a lot for the bourbon industry. His name, his image, his likeness, it surrounds the product that comes out of this distillery. So Stagg needs to keep him on board to keep that product rolling off the shelves. So he does. Taylor, though, doesn't like that he's not calling the shots anymore, right? He's not in charge of his own distillery. They start bumping heads, right? 5-6 years go by, they actually build a brick wall in between their office. They can't stand the side of each other anymore, right? They actually hire on an additional person to run back and forth between their office because they can't stand the sound of each other's voices, guys. This relationship, it's pretty toxic. Not the best, right? So Stagg decides to buy him out of that last share. In order to do so, he builds him a new distillery down the road. Was known as Taylor & Sons. It's now known as Castle and Key, all right? Taylor, very rich history in the bourbon industry. We would love for you guys to come back and check out the Taylor tour, learn a little bit more about him and his life as he affected the timeline of bourbon. But he does have a history beyond his time here at Buffalo Trace, right? Jumping ahead now to 1897, the distillery is now known as George T. Stagg Distillery, and we hire on a young man by the name of Albert Bacon Bland. Oh, I just spoiled it. It's Albert B. Bland. Guys, what does the Albert B. Bland stand for? Bacon, my bad, guys. That was a total brain slip. Albert Bacon Bland, guys. We hire him on board in 1897. He is 16 years old at the time, right? We hire him on board to sweep up after shift. He does some odd and end work around the distillery. He learns the tricks of the trade, right? He stays on board for 55 years, and in 1921, he becomes the president of the distillery. Awesome. Great job, Albert. You worked your way all the way up to the top, right? What's going on in 1921, guys?
Prohibition.
Not the best time to become the president of a distillery, right? Prohibition outlawed the production of alcohol, by the way, just in case you're wondering. That's what we make here. So not a great idea, not a great time to become the president of a distillery. But as I said at the beginning, we're the oldest continuously operating distillery in the United States, right? That's because Blanton had a plan to get through Prohibition, okay? He partnered up with the Shinley Company out of New York. He obtained one of 6 medicinal whiskey licenses, which means you can go to your doctor, you can go to your dentist, you can go to the veterinarian if the dog's sick. Guys, even the barber could write you a prescription back then. You would go to them, you'd say, hey, I got this cough, I just can't shake it. What can you do for me, right? And they would prescribe you 1 pint of 100 proof whiskey, renewable every 10 days. Not bad, right? Not bad. I got a cough, I can use some whiskey, right? Go. Same stuff we're making nowadays, guys. It just had that medicinal label on it, all right? So 10 days goes by, now the wife's got it, now the kids got it, now everybody's sick, right? In total, in the state of Kentucky, we had about 2.5 million people populating the state, yet we wrote over 6 million prescriptions, guys. We sure do love our medicinal whiskey here. My parents actually still believe in the powers of medicinal whiskey.
Yep.
When I was teething as a kid, they would rub Weller on my gums to help soothe that pain and whatnot, Still very effective. Every once in a while when I got a cough, I just pour me a glass and it soothes on right out, guys. It's very powerful stuff. So jumping ahead a little bit further, right? Prohibition ends in 1933. We're going to jump to 1992. From 1933 to 1992, we expanded this distillery a lot, right? A lot of the buildings we're going into today are those buildings that were built during that major expansion led by Albert Bacon Bland, right? But in 1992, the Sazerac Company, a family-operated company out of New Orleans, they purchased the property here, okay? In 1999, they rebranded us to Buffalo Trace, and then they invest $1.2 billion into our infrastructure here with the primary goal of being able to double our capacity to produce bourbon, all right? Are you guys able to find Buffalo Trace products on your shelves at home?
Yep.
Yeah? Pretty good?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That was pretty resounding.
Yeah.
Yeah? All right. Well, that's good news, guys. I'm glad for that. Sometimes you're not able to find them all the way, right? Especially those harder to find products, guys.
The hard to find
Yeah,
ones, yeah,
but at
not
least
so
BT is
hard.
on your shelf. That's a good thing. We can be happy about that. That is exciting. For me? Oh, not for me. But I have good news for those. No, I'm all right. But I have good news for those people that aren't finding those harder to find products, guys. We did finish that $1.2 billion expansion this past January, right? That's when we put in the last of our brand new 93,000 gallon fermentation tanks. We now have 36 of them now on property, right? Before we got there, though, we had to double our stilling capacity, guys. So if you look behind you over here, you're going to see a tall building, okay? If you've ever seen a tall building before, you'll recognize that that's not one, right? But it's actually two buildings, right? You got the older looking brick in the back, that's that old still, right? Every single thing you guys have tasted from Buffalo Trace has come off that old still because we've been using it since Prohibition, guys. That was Albert Bacon Bland's still that he built right after Prohibition. So we know that makes a good product. So in order to replicate that, right, we stopped production for a day. We put a camera in there. This is a huge still, by the way. 7 feet in diameter, 40 feet tall, right? Huge still. So we put a camera in there, we put a few people in there, they measure out every last nut and bolt, right? They send those plans off to a contractor, they say, hey, can you build this for us? They say, absolutely, right? They come in here, they finish building it in November of 2022. Very exciting, right? Very exciting. We have 2 working stills now. Now the one problem with it though, is that on the outside of the column still, the old still, right? There was this dent. Now, nobody really knows if it affects that column still in any way, right? It's not present on the inside of the still, but it's on the outside. Now, our master distiller wasn't happy that this brand new still that they built up for us didn't have that dent, right? So he takes a sledgehammer to it, hammers that dent right into that brand new still. So don't worry, anything that comes off that still will be absolutely identical to the old still, all right? As I mentioned, we built those 24 new fermentation tanks in addition to the 12 that Albert Bacon Bland had built during his time here, right? We also built 19 new warehouses up on top of the hill over here, okay? Those are all about the size of a football field. We call it the whiskey farm up there, right? All about the size of a football field, holding roughly 60,000 barrels each. If you guys do the math, that is 1.2 million barrels up there on the hill. And that's not enough, guys. So we built 17 more warehouses down in London, Kentucky. Of those, 11 of them are built and filled. 6 of them are still under construction and will be filled by the end of the year, all right? In total, over 2 million barrels currently aging underneath the Buffalo Trace umbrella. So all that tells me is that we're going to have a lot more bourbon on the shelves here soon, guys. So get excited. Keep on drinking your bourbon because more of it's on the way, all right? Sound good?
Yeah.
That was about 250 years of history, guys. We have any questions so far? No? One major point we're going to talk about a lot today was the flood that came through here about 3 months ago, okay? About 2.5, 3 months ago. We're going to make a lot of talking points about that. So be sure if you have any questions about it, I'll be sure to answer them. But you guys ready for your quiz?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, we're ready for a quiz, guys. We're coming out this way to take that quiz, all right? Tanya, all right?
Yep, come on, Maddie.